Welcome to the AI Effect, the show for small business owners who are ready to move beyond quick hacks and actually build smarter, more resilient businesses with AI. We'll talk honestly about what's working, what's a mess, the risks you really need to know about, and the simple experiments that create real results. I'm Tara Elsanger, an AI strategist and digital tool trainer, and my job is to make this feel doable, not daunting. Let's begin now.
Hello and welcome to the AI Effect. We're joined today by Mark James. Mark, it's great to see you.
You too, Tara?
Instead of myself introducing you, would you mind telling us a few words about yourself?
Yeah, I hate doing this. I had to do it yesterday as well. So yeah, I'm a lecturer and a consultant in AI. Been involved in not just outside of AI as well. I've taught other courses over the years, but AI is in kind of I suppose the kind of connecting point to everything that I've been teaching over certainly the last decade. So I've taught it from all different dimensions: the strategic side, the governance side, dipping in a little bit into the technical side, and especially as the technology has become easier and easier for organizations and even individuals and small businesses and so on to integrate more and more in the kind of even the technical aspects of implementation as well as all the other aspects of it. But so I created the Artificial Intelligence for Business course for UCD long ago, long before ChatGPT and the hype, and obviously blew up since then because we had a very specific type of people that would be going to a course like that before ChatGPT. But yeah, so since then I created the Advanced AI, and it's obviously a massive area, and I get to tell people that I told you so.
Which is fantastic. And Mark, that's where we obviously got introduced as well, because I did the course and I found it fantastic. And one of the first questions you asked us was, what is AI? And I think that people are still potentially struggling to answer that in reality.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a question. I'm thinking about this recently and talking to people. Would it be an International Women's Day? I think I told you about the first ever computer programmer today,
Yeah.
Ada Lovelace. And a lot more than just a programmer. I mean, this is just a little bit of a side story, but I mean, in 1840s, like Dickens era, Eva and Charles Babbage, essentially invent the first ever computer. I mean, they design it, they couldn't actually build it. And immediately her notes are, and this is all from the 1990s, her notebooks are filled with speculation of, could computers ever create music? Could they ever create art? Could they think for themselves and so on? We're literally the last 5-6 years, we're the generation that's exploring these ideas. And it's something as well that's in her writing that, she said that ultimately, if they can't start the idea, it's not really their idea. They're just a tool. And I
It's
think
just
that's still the case. They can't start anything. We start
No.
them.
And I know one of the biggest focuses we're going to have on that is how to think about the technology and its interaction with society today. And I think it's such an important point. And as you're saying, there does seem to be this kind of conflict when you're calling it intelligence as well, because it's kind of a misnomer, or at least we need to kind of start thinking differently in my mind about what intelligence is. Because as a person, there are so many different layers to intelligence. But would you agree with saying artificial intelligence still doesn't have all those different layers?
Yeah, my opinion on this has kind of become a little bit more nuanced in the last few years. I mean, it's bound to be when you see something acting in a way that you would have traditionally thought that requires intelligence. That's sort of nuance. I think I covered with you before the Turing test in 1950.
Yeah.
This concept of what will intelligence be. There's a book that I've covered recently with my classes from the 1980s that actually explores this idea, and it starts with this very good question of, what's so interesting, what's so important about speaking? Like, why are we judging intelligence by speaking? Like a
Mm.
parrot can speak.
Yeah.
And it's a clever idea, and the book unfolds it in terms of talking about this like imaginary conversation between a human being and another person who's interrogating them to see, are they an AI. And he's asking him, in the sonnet, Midsummer Night's Dream, comparing you to, how about rather than winter, a different, Summer's Day, rather than Summer's Day, why not compare you to Winter's Day? And the
Yeah.
person says, no, that wouldn't work at all. And you say, well, it's a season, it's no different than the other seasons. And the person is saying, no, but like there's like connotations to it that it's negative. But Christmas is during the winter, and surely that's positive. If I compare you to a Christmas Day, that would be good, wouldn't it? Yeah, kind of, but it would still feel a little off. And then it's back and forth. And the idea is that it's not the individual sentences, it's the connections, the deep connections, the
Yes.
concepts, and, shared experiences. I think the clever thing we've done with large language models is we've sort of faked in that stuff. because it's
Mhm.
all there. The connections are there in the way we communicate, and it's coming at it from a different perspective, but it's still on the surface doing the same output.
And when you say kind of it's fate stat, are you kind of suggesting, like, I mean, are you implying that it's still basically the patterns that it's searching, but we're still coding that in?
Yeah, that's not even the right way of thinking about it, because like nobody knows why it works as well as it does.
Yeah.
We know how it works, but we just don't know why it works as well as it does.
Okay.
Like for instance, it's only ever calculating forward a single token.
Mhm.
Most of the time, that's not even a whole word.
Mhm.
Like for instance, I was talking to students during the week, and the word for World Cup in German is a single word rather than us having two. It's four tokens. We
Hmm.
checked it. Four tokens for a single word, which means it didn't even think forward a single word, World Cup in German. It thought forward the first quarter of it, and then it thought forward for the second quarter of it. And it could have gone in a different direction.
Mhm.
So there's no foresight whatsoever.
Okay. And I want to touch back on a point you said there as well about the "I told you so." Maybe if you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit more about this, because back in 2008, I studied the ethics of AI as well. And I remember my professor, Dr. Joel Walmsley, saying we need to start coming up with like ethics around AI now. We need to start creating policies. And, when ChatGPT blew up, for me, it was kind of a thing of, well, where are these policies? Are we actually as far behind as he expected us to be?
Yeah, I think it's more like this is a long story. Like this is why we talked about it in terms of the history of it. People have been speculating on like specifically what would it be like to govern artificial intelligence since the 1940s, or at least we have it in the books. And if anyone's seen the film I, Robot with Will Smith, I mean that's from a short story from the 1940s that explores this concept of if we apply human rules to AI, it's not going to understand them in the same way. It's going to interpret them in unique ways. We're starting to see that now. There's been a lot of talk recently in exploration of the ethics of AI. Do these things have emergent ethics of their own? And we've had experiments where someone set up Claude versus ChatGPT and running a vending machine. And they have to optimize, obviously, to make the most money. At one point, Claude gives a refund to a customer for a gone off bar of a Mars bar or something, and then decides to change its mind because it's not good for profits. And yeah, it takes the money again. So there is an emergent sort of ethics happening with these things. And the other side then as well is that we have a small number of very, very wealthy people who control these models. And we're giving over a huge amount of power to them. And we're giving over power that, like, I think the biggest thing really that I've been thinking about for a long time is that you have to think forward on the implications of the technology, because if you wait till it comes here, it's too late. We've seen that now with Grok, with the image generation, the horrendous stuff that's been coming out of that. It's too late. You just dismiss it and say, look, that's what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to put the cat back in or the genie back in the bottle. So it's something where, like, I throw one out that's not as science fiction-y anymore. We already have drones going out and killing people. This is why the big Pentagon issue with Anthropic recently, and now they're suing them back, is they want to have the ability to use their AI to send drones off and kill people totally autonomously. We're going to have humanoid robots that look like Terminators soon.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things that, like, this seems so far out there, but it's not really when you think about it. You see what's going on in America right now. Could there be an entire takeover by one man? No, because you'd expect that the military, made up of people who have family and so on, would prevent it going too far. Well, what if the military is made up of robots and drones?
That's right.
We
Yeah.
have to think of the implications before we get anywhere near this level. And that's the furthest out I can think of, and even that's realistic. And then you get the shorter stuff, the discrimination and hiring, which we already see. Amazon, I don't know if I covered it with you, but
Yeah.
Amazon themselves had a model that discriminated against women. And it
Yes.
was only when it was investigated that they could see it. But why did the engineers not spot this when they were building it? Because they have no ethics background.
They've no ethics background in AI. That's a really powerful point there as well, because sometimes it's about spotting your own bias when it comes to these things, and coding in bias. Like, that is something that could potentially happen here.
Yeah, and always the fallback, and this has been going on for a long time, decades, is that we didn't build the model with an understanding of race or sex. And in America, for instance, a decade ago, there was a case where they have a model. It's actually still up and running. What it does is, if you've got a person in front of you in certain parts of America, the judge will have a dashboard, and it'll give a score out of 10 of the most likely to least likely chances of this person recidivism, where they commit a crime if I leave them out on bail. And it turns out that it's been like heavily discriminating against African Americans. And it's very clear. We can see the output. We can see that you would have a person who's 18, who's, only like stolen a bike or something once and never did anything else, getting a very high score for likelihood to commit a crime again. A white person who's shot up people for 30 years and done all sorts of things, spent 6 years in prison, getting a low score. And they say, well, it doesn't even know the race of these people.
Can
It's
you
not
explain
included as data.
why, like, because of the data that it is actually, I suppose, capturing and what these models have been trained on as well. And to kind of even simplify that for people who may not understand what it is we're talking about, I remember again, there were two very clear examples that came through from the course. One was the glass of wine, and another one was the image of a clock or a watch. And it's,
Mm.
so when you think about generative AI, it's generating these images based on the data that it has collected. And it couldn't, if you wanted to say, fill up a glass of wine, and I know it's come along since then even, but if you want to fill up a glass of wine to the top, it couldn't do it because it didn't have any reference point to it. So even now when we're talking about like these kind of racial points and things like that, well, yeah, it hasn't been built in, I suppose, necessarily, but it is going off of the data that is already biased.
Yeah, and it's the connections, the inferences. I mean, the machine learning models, we can see when we call them a black box, just for maybe people who don't know, this is ultimately one of the biggest problems with it, is the fact that you can't like really audit these things. You can
Okay.
audit them with little things like SHAP and stuff, where you change a small thing in the input and see what effect it has in the output. But to me, they're very similar, actually. I use this analogy when we think of black boxes. We're kind of similar to the Victorians, in that we're the generation has to figure out how to try to get this technology integrated in a way that's good and less of the bad. And they had the same with electricity and a bunch of other modernity things. And one of the things that I kind of think about with it is that the Victorian era, the black box of the Victorian era was the factory.
Yeah.
And I'm not the first person to come up with this idea, but like you look at it right from an economics, because I used to teach economics. Economists and policymakers and so on looked at their society, the Dickens era, as being this very wonderful modern society. Everything looked nice and clean. They couldn't see inside the factories. All they saw was inputs and outputs. And we obviously look back on the Victorian era. We know the factories were horrendous. I mean, like Dickens, because he experienced it as a child, got to write about it and so on, tried to get the word out that this was just horrendous. Children were being, essentially killed in these factories through shocking conditions. Yeah, it's to me, I wonder what they're going to say in 100 years' time when they look back in this era, and they're going to say there's a lot of decisions were made by black boxes, and it all looked nice and neat from a distance with the policymakers, but in reality, you had all this discrimination and all these people that suffered the consequences of things that they had no control over.
And I suppose on that, and again, you brought up some of the things that we're seeing coming out in the news, including Grok, and Anthropic, and all the issues that are going on there. There's kind of the accountability part. From my side, it has to be both sides. It has to be, both the company themselves taking responsibility and taking accountability for what it is that they're building. But we also need to take accountability for how we're using it. For those of us who are using it, what kind of influence are we having every time we interact with AI?
Yeah, it's a difficult question because at the moment it's being presented as being there's two extremes. There's either people who are totally revolted by every aspect of it, from the power imbalances. You look at the sorts of people that have control of these tech companies. I mean, if there was any thought that there were any bit decent human beings, that's gone in the last couple of years. It's they refuse to use AI, and then they're under pressure because people are saying, well, it's going to be competitors to your job are going to have 20 times the companies then requiring you to show that you've got AI skills and so on. There's a lot of stuff people can do. It's a false dichotomy. I'm not saying that people should be anti-AI at all. There is actually a lot of really good AI. There's a lot of bad use cases of it. I definitely think it's good to stop paying companies that are using it in a bad way. I think there's going to be more and more of companies pushing back as well on what models have been used. So up to this point, Microsoft Copilot's had GPT in the back end, but now they've added Claude as well. So at least you've options. So then if even a simple thing like saying to your company, I'll use Copilot, but I need to know what model is being used in the back end. And I don't trust this one company, I trust this other one. You then go to Microsoft, not a big deal. They switch it over, or they confirm that they'll only use one model. And these things then filter through the market mechanism. Ultimately, these companies will demand better behavior from the likes of OpenAI or switch to alternatives.
And actually, that's a really good point, even for business owners, et cetera, who potentially have some proprietary data and, where that information is potentially being shared. There was obviously talks as well, like Anthropic having a few issues with companies within China and what it was that they were doing with the data that on the Anthropic models as well.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that's really important with literacy is why I've been pushing it so hard for so long is that you get to know what questions to ask. The power of asking questions is so like I think people underestimate what we can do collectively. We all think that individually we kind of have no choice but to go along with whatever big tech say, and in reality, I mean, we've always, like even the Victorian example, change has come from people like-minded and educating each other, and it's simple things. You don't have to go to the opposite extreme. You can say there's ethical uses of AI. I would have loved if the EU, like I was talking to someone recently, the EU has been great in terms of words. They're saying all the right things. The Digital Act and so on, Services Act, excellent what they're saying. Tying it to human rights. The way the EU AI Act is a product regulation. Right? And it's very much a case of like people think it's not intuitive. It's actually very intuitive. If you think from the perspective of what makes sense from a human rights or just even a basic ethical standpoint, you tend to understand what falls into different categories and how to justify things. So brilliant, words and regulations, but they need to throw money out there. We need an ethical AI model. We need ethical platforms, data, and so on. And that's the one thing that we're missing. But the other side of it is there is always the alternative of open source. So I would say to people, think about what you're actually looking to do. Maybe you don't need to go with the big tech companies. Maybe you try something that's open source.
Okay. And like, I suppose this is such a very big topic, and I'm very conscious that want to try and keep it in a way that makes sense for people and keep it kind of short and sweet where possible. But in terms of kind of like ethics in society, like what do you feel like we're missing right now? Like what is it that you feel like the EU potentially isn't doing, or these companies aren't doing to make things more ethical? And
Well, from the EU's perspective, it just comes down to money. They have not invested anywhere near enough to build up the sort of capability and been leaning on American big tech for too long. I think, it's a bit, America has its own philosophy on the way things should be run. We have our own. We can't really complain too much about the Americans if, we've not tried to, create an alternative. And I think there is going to be a space for an alternative. Unfortunately, it requires a lot of money to do an ethical AI. I mean, it requires a lot of money to do the current AIs, which are not at all ethical, filled with all sorts of issues. But I think in terms of what most people are looking for from AI, I was thinking about this recently. The way they're moving in terms of thinking modes, and they're moving more and more like they've already got trillions of parameters. They're already too big, in my opinion, the models. The most people's use case of them is so basic that like just a basic open model, which is getting easier and easier for people to run. You can run these things on if you've got a decent phone, you can run them on the phone
yeah.
or PC or laptop, and it's getting more and more like that. I do wonder what's the point of all these very, very big models when a basic computer in 5 years' time will run something that's equivalent to ChatGPT today. That's where we are really for most people. And so the thinking models to me are just to replace people, and I don't see how you could do that with governance and so on. So there's a real mismatch here. There's a lack of coherence between what the market is trying to do. So we're all chasing each other's tails, and they're being rewarded by the market for doing so. But the other side, there's no kind of connection to like, what does this actually look like? I don't see, like I was talking with people this morning about what Microsoft are trying to do. Like all these surveys you see, they're always like always in relation to some tech company that's trying to push a specific view. And all of it is to try to get you to integrate AI throughout all of your processes, get it so so integrated that it'll be very difficult, if not impossible, to disentangle,
To
which is
move
what
off their
Windows.
platform and to go
Yeah, but like you think about Windows, for instance. Like, why do we use Windows? Well, initially people got into Windows, and software, then specialist software for your profession, for your industry, is built around Windows, and people just stick with Windows. But in reality, open source stuff like LinkedIn, I would say Linux, and open Office like LibreOffice and things like that are more than enough for most people, and actually offer all the kind of service packs and updates and things like that. So there's a lot that comes from just getting an education at a high level of what's going on. And then you start seeing things you can optimize small decisions that you make. And if enough people are doing that, I think it'll it'll solve a lot of the problems. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
And where would you suggest people start in order to get that AI literacy? Because, again, it's kind of getting it from the right source as well.
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say. Basically, I can't recommend anything. I can't recommend any book. I can't recommend any specific person. There's people I
Okay.
thought were speaking sense, and then there's the incentive. Then in the market when someone's got a kind of a voice or whatever, that they start pushing certain views because they're getting access to specialist tools and things from these companies. So I think like-minded people is the best
Yeah.
thing. I try to create communities of practice within my classes. I've got GenAIreland, which is the group I have on WhatsApp or sorry, LinkedIn. And it's just having like-minded people that everyone's got a little piece of the puzzle. And sort of when you have people sharing ideas and getting each other thinking, that's where a lot of really good stuff comes from. And I find it within my classes that the best stuff comes from me not telling people answers. It's just giving them a space, asking them to do a little bit of thinking. And once they have some base understanding of how AI works, there's actually a lot of really clever ideas and questions come from that.
Do you mind telling us a little bit more about GenAIreland?
Yeah, it was just something we wanted to set something up. I had classes that would ask me, is there some way that we could carry on after the class where we'd have some place that we could chat or like put up ideas or share tools that we're using. I eventually, because we had tried and failed with a few things to kind of get started, just decided to create something on LinkedIn, just a group, and number of people have joined it, and it's the great thing about it is that it's got enough people now that are like-minded that people can share things and question things. And if someone wanted to post something about a particular tool that they liked, that other people like myself could comment on it. And I think because there's just so much out there on social media, and there's just so many influencers that are involved in the space that clearly have no idea what they're talking about. They've jumped into AI 5 minutes ago, and they've got people thinking that they're the experts on it. I think having a group of people who are like just even that base level of I don't know all the answers, but I'm open to having conversations and thinking about it. There's a real space for that, and that's what we've done on LinkedIn. It's still relatively small. I think it's like 400 and something people right now, but every one of them very much thinking about AI. Usually either lecturers in AI or people that have gone through my courses and so on.
Excellent. That's brilliant. And before we jumped on this call, you were telling me that you might have a story about the Ireland game next week.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things I do in the class, one of them, because it's there's a serious reason for it. I don't do it for frivolous reasons, but it's fun too. I get them to do something creative. I tell them, I put them into groups, and I tell them, there's a bunch of tools, and I'll point you in the direction, but let's see what you can do with them, just to have a bit of fun. And we created at a group a few months back, and we created a Troy Parrott song, and we were inspired by Paul McGrath, and so we
Yeah.
created the song, which was relatively easy to do, and then got all the footage from the hat trick and put it all together and with the song, and did some editing in, trying to get some of the commentary to flow in with the song a bit. And so we took what was, you could have called it AI slop, because it's the term that's going around at the moment. Anything that's generated by AI is slop. But as I tell classes, the way to get around that is, and it's not to get around it, but it's more, if you start off with something that's meaningful, and then you use AI as a tool to create that meaning, especially if you've never had the skills to create animations or songs, if you're not musical or whatever it is. But if you've used AI as a tool to bring your vision to life, and especially if it's something meaningful, there's emotions attached to it and so on, I can't see how it's slop. And that's not slop, that song. And the other side of it is I tried to post it on YouTube and immediately got caught by the FIFA AI, whatever you want to call it. That's Telltale Tattle Dummy. So I couldn't put it up on that platform. I might try it on LinkedIn. It is a very catchy song, and I'd probably launch it maybe a week before the
The
game.
game. Excellent. Very good. Yeah, it'd be great to hear that. And as you said, it's really interesting to see kind of like a few people coming together to make one of those projects. I remember happening, because it's like AI doesn't know what you don't know. So coming together like that, it's just really good to kind of share in and like prompting and learn how to other people are using different tools as well, because it's going to help you get better with that as well.
Yeah, a tip I give people is that most people who are disappointed in AI is they don't realize that like it's because it's been trained on everything. It's sort of its standard mode is very flat.
Hmm.
It seems
Yeah.
very generic, and what's actually happening is you're not doing your bit. You're
Yeah.
not telling it certain perspectives. I had a class this morning where I gave them a few different lenses to put into their prompt, different ways of looking at the situation, and it got very rich. feedback or response back from the researcher did. The same with music and so on. If you give it very specific details, don't just say I want an Irish song and such and such. You put in the instruments that you're looking for. You give it some sense of the emotional roller coaster the song's going to go on. The Suno model works really well with that. And then you try different things, and once it connects with you, if you start with a story, it has meaning. If you just generate stuff, there's no meaning. I think we need to, figure out where we're going to position ourselves with this technology. A lot of people are still trying to figure it out. I had someone this morning say, well, it went off and did all the research for me. So what's my purpose now? And I said, look what it's done. It's after doing a full overview of the whole industry.
Yeah.
But there's things here that are like, just read through it. You spot something, start sleuthing. You're like it's giving you the clues. So now
Yeah.
you can start digging into it. And I think it's just that orienting yourself towards the technology. We can maybe, get the tech companies away from the, going too far with thinking mode and things like that, because ultimately that's a way of filling out the prompt, doing the work that you should be doing. And I don't know how far they're going to be able to take it. Like, it's still not perfect. I had an issue actually this morning. I think I have it here. I prompted, it's something that's been going around, but there's a new model that's out. And I use thinking mode with it. It's GPT 5.4. I use the thinking mode. I asked it a very simple question, and it still got it wrong. And that question was, I want to wash my car, and the car wash is only 100 meters away.
Yeah.
You think I should drive there or walk? So
And
it's
it's
been around
walk.
for a while. It's been tried with previous models. I tried it
Yeah.
with thinking and the latest model, and I still got it wrong. And
Yeah.
really what's going on is that they're having to figure out how much thinking does it do. So like, I mean, as I tell all my friends and that are like coders and stuff, don't just ask it the basic question. Do a little bit of thinking first. Take away some of its, autonomy, because otherwise, it's your autonomy that you're trading. There's always a trade-off with every tool.
Yeah. And, I even say that to a lot of who I support and help is like small business owners. And I'm like, well, if you're to bring somebody into your company, you'd train them in and you wouldn't expect them to know everything from the beginning. And it's like, well, ChatGPT, if you're using that tool, yes, it has access to all this information, but it still may not understand it in your business context. And it's still up to you as the person to share that information with them, to give them a framework to work with. So it's still the same with AI. It still needs a bit of a framework to understand what it is you're trying to explain.
I'll give you a simple example of where people get caught out. With Microsoft, you can create agents for all sorts of things.
Yeah.
One of the things that people will create will be, this is basic one, might be an IT service desk, or you've got access to your company documents and you want people to ask it questions to be able to get information internally. You have to put into the prompt that if it doesn't find the answer, it is to give you this response. I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't put that in. It doesn't always hallucinate, but
No.
sometimes it does. And so
Yeah.
you really have to talk to this thing like a child and think of all the implications. It's like the monkey paw from Arabian Nights or wherever it's from. You always have to think of what stupid thing could this thing do, and try to get ahead of it and put it into the prompt. You have to tell a Microsoft tool not to make something up. I think that's extraordinary, but it defines where we are right now.
Yeah, and even with the date as well, I would often tell people to put in the date, especially if you're looking at trends or something like that, because it's not necessarily going to know that you're talking about March 2026 unless you explain that to it.
Especially since it doesn't have it yet.
Yeah.
For it, its cutoff point is whenever it is. It's getting closer. I think it's late
Yeah,
last year. But at one point, it was like 2.5 years behind the real world, its
that's
knowledge of
right.
the world, which is
Yeah.
incredible.
I actually had a customer who lost her website recently enough, and we were able to use ChatGPT to get a lot of it back simply because it was scraping the web from when it was still available for her. It's interesting to see kind of things like that, but as you said, it is catching up. I had I suppose, kind of maybe two questions that I wanted to finish with, and one was, you've written in that we live in a society that's shaped by algorithm. Where do you see that shape happening most strongly for everyday, business owners and people?
So there's sort of two things. Maybe I can kind of start off with a kind of a principle. I think I mentioned something like this before, but there's a thing in technology called Amara's law. It's named after a futurist from the 20th century, Roy Amara. And his idea was that basically we tend to underestimate what can be achieved in a decade, or like longer period of times, and we overestimate what we can do in a short period of time. And I think you've got a lot of people right now that are downplaying AI, and so and then the opposite. Then people are playing it up that it's brilliant right now, and in reality, both are right. The people who are downplaying and hyping it are both right. It's just different timelines, and I think that's one of the issues that businesses have right now is trying to figure out, when do you actually jump in. I mean, there's a lot of FOMO around right now.
Yeah.
And what I would say to people, and I was actually talking to someone this morning about this, who's a a small and medium-sized business owner, there's no rush. Like the rush is this is Microsoft's timeline. They want, and not just Microsoft, but the companies like that, they want you to wrap their tool around. Copilot is getting, there's going to be an increase in price in July, apparently. I think it's 15%. Office itself, Office 365 is getting an increase as well because you get a little bit of free Copilot, whether you like it or not. So they're trying to get you to be hooked on their Office and Windows and so on, which may go a subscription as well. And in reality, if you think about it, like apart from things like fixing your data and all of the basic stuff, the digitization and digitalization stuff, the actual AI stuff, implementing AI doesn't take long anymore. So
No.
why rush it? Why, like your competitor might do it 2 year or do it now and you do it in 2 years' time. It doesn't mean there's going to be a 2-year gap between you forever. If anything, you jump in 2 years' time, it'll be more stable. You'll have a better idea of how to integrate it if you've got your strategy right, because doing AI is different to strategy. So get the strategy right first. That's your top down. Then allow people to play around with these things, bottom up, try to find value. Don't feel like you have to go all in on AI at all. Absolutely not. That's their timeline. These tools are not ready. Microsoft should not be selling things that you have to tell it not to lie to you, right? It's not ready. It's beta, and it does not take long to integrate. Education, fix your data if you think that that's going to be really important, and it's not there yet. Just think about the way your processes are. Do you really need to to automate certain things? Maybe the implications, like I think we've moved away as well. This is another thing, kind of a high level view. We've moved away from thinking, can AI do something, to thinking, what are the trade-offs? Like AI can now do everything in theory, but it's the trade-offs. And at the moment, big tech, it doesn't care about the negative consequences of other people when they throw these things out, but we have to care.
We do. And actually, it's a really, really good point as well. There's a lot of fear mongering going on, saying like, if you don't do it, your competitor's doing it. And you can kind of see that language coming through where it's, making people very fearful. But as you said yourself, like start with the education, start with a strategy before you bring in AI and start disrupting all your own systems without fully understanding what those systems are doing. I think that's even more true in Ireland, where you have still, I would say, a very vast difference between the digitalization of some businesses, where there are some that have very little digital platforms and really no need for it, but are still being told they need to consider what impact this is going to have on their business.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, really, that so much of this is so top down. It's easy to get access to the C-suite. It's easy to fill their heads with these promises and so on. I think one of the issues that we have, and I think it's probably the main reason why we have so many scandals, but we have so many stories of things like lawyers or law firms are in trouble for loads of generated nonsense and made up reports and put these into courts, and some of the public sector has done things as well that's gone up online that's clearly generated, and they have implications there. They can't just take things down.
Yeah.
All sorts of issues, data protection issues. So the sense, I suppose, that kind of that for the employee type side of things is that they have this huge emphasis from senior management on them using AI, but there's also this expectation that they're now like 10 times more productive. So a task, a research project that they might have given a person a few weeks to do, suddenly they're expecting it by tomorrow afternoon. And it puts such pressure on them, and then they have to go out and use these tools that they know make things up, and they don't have the time to to use them in the correct way and to verify every source. And then they get fired, depending on what part of the country or part of the world they're in, by different consultancy firms or whatever, when reports turn out to be a lot of made up stuff. So it's a very unfortunate thing that a lot of employees really are in a very difficult situation. But if they're educated and they're able to make these arguments and they can educate the people above them, I think organizations would be a lot better off. I think as more of these stories come out of the damage that's caused by reckless use of AI, I think it really feeds into helping those purple people that my course has been trying to develop for years.
Yeah. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything that you'd like to finish off on, or that you feel like we haven't touched? I know we barely scratched the surface in reality, but is there anything that you'd like to say as your final note?
I would say that it's a good time to be curious, even if you think that like this is very unethical, and there is genuine reasons for people, especially in the creative spaces and and even coders now and so on to feel it's very unethical because it's been trading on their work, and it's removing, it's essentially turning what was an income statement thing, which was work, into a balance sheet thing, an asset that can be owned by companies. So there is a lot of negative aspects to it, but at the same time, there's a lot of positives here too. And I think in certain industries like healthcare and so on, you get such a massive difference between supply and demand for things. Lots of people that can't go to to see a psychiatrist, or to get checkups for things, having access to an AI, even if it's not perfect, as long as you understand that it's not perfect and how to interact with it and how to use it as a tool, is actually very, I think it's very pro-democracy in many ways, as long as we can get the other side right and get the governance right and regulations. And thank God we're living in the EU.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you there. Thank you so much again, Mark. If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn. I don't bother with other social media. LinkedIn is good enough for me.
Fantastic. Thanks again.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye.
AI is already inside your business. The real change happens when you start using it on purpose. If this conversation was helpful, follow the AI effect. Leave a short review and share this episode with someone who's figuring this out alongside you. I'm Tara Zanger, and I'm back soon with more real talk on what's working, what's breaking, and how to make AI feel doable, not daunting.